Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this year's International Criminology Conference. We'll have a variety of panels throughout the day. Keep in mind that we are running up to 4 concurrent rooms throughout the day, and there's a link for every session in the program. Feel free to let us know of any issues or questions throughout the day today. And we're going to get started with our opening keynote session with Professor Alain Boer. Mr. Alain Boer is a professor of criminology at the National Conservatory of Arts and Crafts in Paris. He's also a senior fellow at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York and the China University of Political Science and Law in Shanghai. He has also worked as an advisor to the New York City Police Department and the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Professor Boer has received numerous awards, including Knight of the Legion of Honor and the Grand Cross of the Lafayette Order, and has published many books on different aspects of criminology. I will now give the floor to Professor Alain Boer.
Thank you very much. Good morning for those who are on the West. Good afternoon for the others. I'm talking from Paris, and I would like to discuss with you the art of criminology in a chaotic world. As Daniel told you, I am a professor, but I was a long time an advisor to the French government, and I was accustomed to commenting on the actions of those who preceded me and sometimes succeeded me as an advisor to government, afterwards transformed in a professor. I often wondered at their inability to see what was before their eyes, to understand the evidence revealed then 10, 20, 30, 100 years later, until I had to do to myself what I was doing to others. I lived through the 1981-2023 period at the heart of state power, first with Prime Minister Michel Rocard, then with most of his successors, presidents, minister of the interior, defense or foreign affairs, police or intelligence chiefs. And I didn't have my nose to the grindstone anymore than those whose lucidity I was questioning. For the first time, I had to revisit what I had seen or known just over 30 years ago. This is the origin of my latest, somewhat atypical work, which combines revelation of recently declassified document, historical perspective, relative self-criticism, and element for preparing the future using the art of criminology. Of course, we are all familiar with the Roman adage, si vis pacem para bellum, if you want peace, prepare for war, attributed to Vegetius, who happened to be a public finance specialist in the 4th century. We stopped wanting peace when we thought we had it in full possession after the fall of the Berlin Wall, which made any effort to prepare for war useless and costly. In the spirit of the reversal that has led us to ask ourselves not what kind of world we are going to leave our children, but what kind of children we're going to leave to our world, we may well ask ourselves whether, by preparing only for peace, we did not unconsciously want war as the ultimate outlet for this great Erasmus, where citizens were no more than consumers, living between parties and metaverse. On the European continent and the West, the peace dividends after the fall of the Berlin Wall were events essentially used to disarm the core of public service organization, not only the army, but also the police, healthcare, and schools, and of course, energy. We had hoped for a happy globalization, only to discover the harsh realities of confrontation and power relations. Not because we didn't see them, when we didn't see every conflict that has ensued in the last 30 years has been duly documented, but because we did not understand them. Rarely has a mirage persisted for so long and the eyes of so many as that of happy globalization. Its durability, no doubt, owes much to the condition of its birth, in the place of the walls that divide Berlin, symbol of the fatality of war, the matrix of history. No sooner had it fallen than all the dreams of universal happiness, whether they originated in the subconscious of the world deemed haunted by the hope of the millennium, or in what Marx and Engels call the icy waters of egoistic calculation, whether they emanated from the spirit of utopia or from the planning of experts, were constituted into an apparently universal illusion, that of a humanity that had finally dialectically overcome war and was therefore capable of progressing in peace. Rereading a number of texts from the 90s, one is struck by their religious character, both prophetic and ironic. The stars of the European flag, whose symbolism will have escaped only those who didn't want to see it, became the banner of a new faith. Suddenly, freed from the Soviet threat, hypnotized by the market communism proclaimed by Deng Xiaoping, and therefore indifference to the fate of the attempted democratic revolution crushed by tanks in Tiananmen Square, Westerners imagined that the world would simply and naturally turn into an hypermarket, with former adversary and allies becoming ruthless suppliers or buyers without conviction or ambition of domination. As a geopolitical, economic, social, and cultural project, globalization was able to surf triumphantly from 1992 onwards on a powerful intellectual production within which Francis Fukuyama's The End of History rapidly established itself as a reference work. Kojève's inspiration, according to which the ideological victory of Western liberalism put an end to global competition, met with the general public eager to believe in this promise, disregarding the discrete warming of the man for whom the supremacy of liberal democracy was far from synonymous with an absence of conflicts. As early as 1996, Samuel Huntington announced, a contrario, the clash of civilization, considering that after having been predatory and then ideological, future wars will see the confrontation of a few large blocs determined by their cultural and religious identity, which amounted to endorsing the market as the universally accepted framework for major confrontation. In 1997, Zbigniew Brzezinski, the greatest strategist and sorcerer apprentice of the second half of the 20th century, took up the theses of the Anglo-Saxon school, and approving the attention given before him by Alfred Mackinder and Nicholas Spykman to Eurasia as a center of world geopolitics, drew up the grand chessboard, a major inspiration for American foreign policy. He succeeded in reinventing the jihad and foreshadowing the return of a new bipolarity prior to the major confrontation between the United States and its allies and China, and an alternative axis comprising the remnants of the Warsaw Pact, the new Russia, Iran, and North Korea, under the watchful and interested, sometimes tragic gaze of India, Indonesia, and the Gulf states. Between the end of history and the end of war to defend or uphold national interest, between the denial of the very principle of violent contradiction and the denial of old antagonism replaced by new cartography, the thinkers of the post-war era invented their own dystopia and mobilized around them an army of peace business soldiers blinded by the lure of gain. During the last 30 years, this interlude, which resembles more an interwar period than a lasting effort at successful pacification, economic competition, the loss of industrial sovereignty, and geopolitical naivety, have enabled the rebirth of empires, Chinese, Persian, Ottoman, Russian, which had been subjugated by the technological superiority of the West in asymmetrical wars. Their defeats had never been digested, and despite smiles and bows to the arrogant West, their leaders ruminated on their past greatness, giving themselves times for a whispered reconquest. In 2023, the list of the world's most populous countries highlights the retreat of democracy and freedoms. China remains under the domination of the Communist Party alone and is painfully emerging from permanent confinement. India is experiencing ever greater restrictions on freedom. The United States almost experienced its first coup d'etat. Brazil heard a similar backlash. Pakistan is on the brink of implosion. Nigeria is struggling to maintain its unity. Russia, Egypt, Vietnam, the Philippines, Turkey, Iran, Thailand, Burma, Nigeria, Mozambique, the Sahel-Saharan zone, and Ethiopia are at war or under severe internal tension. We are worried about India, Malaysia, and Indonesia, and we don't even dare to imagine life in Bangladesh. The Palestinian territories are preparing for a new intifada, and Mexico is undergoing one of the world's deadliest war against drug cartels. Unfortunately, the list is not exhaustive. Taking the time to visualize a map of risk zone on the websites of Foreign Affairs Department of the West reduces the world to a few blue oasis destinations immersed in an ocean of red prohibitions. The special military operation in Ukraine did not start in 2022, nor in 2014. It was prepared at the end of the 2008 NATO summit in Bucharest by Vladimir Putin's last warning to the West a few weeks after the Munich conference, where he had stunned his interlocutor, notably Chancellor Merkel of Germany. Putin, long time the West man in Moscow, who has done everything to find a solution to the US-CIS relationship, who had launched disarmament and guided American agents to the most secret site in the former USSR, was a signal of the end of peace. In an age of food and drug shortage, microchips and mustard seeds, it's hard to believe that sovereignty cannot be outsourced to a state that was originally built on the opposite logic. Even today, as the latest national strategic reviews reminds us, it is difficult to move beyond the accounting inertia and habits of the war before. Today, we have rediscovered the intensity of war. Of course, we were alerted to the unsustainable level of cuts in the armed forces budget, and we are now discovering that along with high intensity, we also need to deal with long intensity. Whether it's high-tech equipment or munition or resilient equipment, whether it's a move upmarket or operational readiness, regular readings of parliamentary reports shows that having a more and more high-tech weaponry, but less and less available, poses the problem of what a long war can be, and not just a dry deterrent or a projection force. The lessons from the war in Ukraine are mobility, drones, new tools, good old-fashioned technology, resilience, resistance, and above all, operational and citizen-based territorial defense. What the Ukrainian army reminds us of every day is what a citizen's army is, a nation in arms, which does not subcontract its sovereignty and defend solely to its military forces, but which considers military and civil defense, cyber and commando operation as elements that go hand in hand as part of a flexible and adaptable military doctrine and strategy. Our manufacturers know how to sell what they know how to make. Our military know how to use what they are sold. Our politicians often know how to explain to both of them how to do without their needs. So what have we really learned from Ukraine? Do the heavy and expensive military programs imagined 20 or 30 years ago respond to the lessons of war in Ukraine? Since 2001, we have known that nuclear deterrence serves only those who still believe in it. There will never have been an attack on the Pentagon, never an attack on the World Trade Center, and there will never have been an attempted attack on the Capitol if the perpetrators of these attacks had believed in the risk of a nuclear aftershock. The major states with nuclear deterrent have not, however, sacrificed their conventional forces. Neither did the United States, China, Russia, India, and Pakistan. And what about North Korea? Nuclear deterrence is not only useful against nuclear attacks, it also has a perfectly conventional dimension. Any attack that threatens national sovereignty, be it a virtual attack, a real attack, an attack on satellite networks, computer networks, telephone networks, energy production, or water distribution centers, food distribution, logistics, on overseas territories, all fall within the logic of difference. In short, nuclear deterrence can be used for everything, but it's not the answer to everything, or at least it is not longer it. In this respect, we need to rearm both citizens and the military, recover our industrial and technological sovereignty, and upgrade and rediscover the operational defense of our territories. Cyber threats have expanded to a day-to-day exercise of survival, attacked rarely by APT, mostly by crooks using the vulnerability of the human factor more than their own coding capabilities. Criminology is a medical science. It's used diagnosis, prognosis, and therapeutical debate to cure a disease. But it is very difficult to play Dr. House in reality. To detect, analyze, and answer need a methodology and a capacity to accept, to understand our capacity for amnesia and our connective biases that creates chaos and disasters. Luis Arroyo Zapatero explains that Europe has been a permanent battlefield since 1808, the date of the Napoleonic invasions. Since the Crimean War with Russia on the one hand, and Turkey, France, and England on the other, followed by the Franco-Prussian War, and then the First World War, which quickly gave way to the Second World War, it is almost always the same thing. In the West, the urge to invade France, the Ruhr to seize coal and steel; in the East, the urge to seize Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe, and the conquest of the living space, the Lebensraum. Over the past 500 years, almost all European countries had their borders modified by wars, from Russia to the United Kingdom. Only Spain and Portugal have partially been spared, also not by civil wars. But today's war marks the return of interstate conflict with territorial pretension in Europe, a figure last seen in 1945. It is above all a crime of aggression, and its conduct results in many war crimes and crimes against humanity. The issues raised by the existence of wars has always sparked deep reflection, either since the classical authors or what would be called today political science, although a general theoretical framework only emerged after the end of First World War under the banner of geopolitics. But phenomena such as those we experience today must be approached from different viewpoints: law, international relations, economics, and criminology. What we witness are atrocious crimes leading to terrible casualties and damage perpetrated in the cruelest of ways. Preventing such crimes requires understanding how the underlying processes of force, ambition, and confrontation emerge and evolve. A criminology of war and its atrocity is necessary. Crimes of war, as well as the crimes perpetrated by the states against its own citizens, are the gravest of crimes, and yet criminology, born with a bang in the second half of the 19th century, has only very recently started addressing this type of crime, almost systematically after the Balkan Wars in the 90s. Before that, only 3 criminologists have attempted to examine the wars and the crime: Hermann Mannheim, Sheldon Gluck, and Mariano Ruiz Funes, all motivated by the genocides and atrocities, genocide, and atrocities of the Second World War. Ruth Jamieson begins the introduction to her book Toward a Criminology of War by stating that despite significant recent debates about the decline of barbarism in the 20th century, the incidence and ferocity of war and ethnic conflicts show no sign of abating, and that contemporary European criminology remains largely aloof and impassive to these issues. 5 years before the current war in Ukraine, the author concluded that despite compelling historical and substantive reasons, contemporary criminology has not paid attention to the complex connections that structure the relationship between war and crime. For Alex Appier, the reasons for this lack of interest lie in the fact that contemporary mass crimes are most often committed during armed conflict, in the aftermath of such conflicts, or during periods of crisis and prolonged destabilizations. Attacks on civilian populations then appear to outside observers as acts of war, collateral damage, or unavoidable acts resulting from an uncontrollable context, and that most of these war crimes and atrocity are the result of a project, usually the appropriation of a territory and the purge of its undesirable elements. Genocide became the subject of criminological investigation after the commission of crimes in the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda. But it was not until 2009 that the Stockholm Prize in Criminology was awarded to Raoul Zaffaroni for his work in mass state crime, which were epidemic in Latin America in the 70s and the 80s. The reasons for this delay are multiple: epistemological problems preventing the analysis of this heinous crime as crime of ordinary, rational people, difficulties in apprehending the reality of events of such magnitude, difficulties in obtaining data indispensable to an evidence-based criminology, difficulties in finding the victims and understanding their languages. But the criminological approach, the material identification of the behaviors and the processes that led to such atrocities, the characteristics of the power and command relationship of armed groups are essential not only for the development of an adequate criminal policy towards international crimes, but also for the administration of international justice. The International Criminal Court devastating acquittal in the Bamba II case stems from a failure to consider the material properties of the act prosecuted in both the trial and the sentence. Of course, no one can annihilate the principle of a disease whose cause has been forgotten. It is this disease that is destined to annihilate everything, just as war is right about peace as soon as it forgets that they are mutually constitutive. That peace is a moment of war, just as war is a moment of peace in the uninterrupted flux that makes up the history of the Anthropocene, which is military advance accelerating a civil innovation, and vice versa. The time has come then to apprehend the world as it is rather than ignoring it, to understand it rather than dreaming about it, to work it rather than consume it, to prepare for the war that's coming in order to hold on to peace that's going, to strive to make history so as not to be devoured by it, and to accept that as long as history continues, any lifeline maybe one day have to become a front line. The story of failure in war can always be summed up in 2 words: too late. Too late to understand the mortal objective of a potential enemy, too late to realize the mortal danger, too late to prepare, said General MacArthur. It's time for us to understand that in the beginning was war, we are facing the war, and we are still hoping to end in peace. Thank you for your listening, and I'm now ready, after you have a time for digestion of this pretty long introduction, for question and discussion, if this will suit you.
Thank you, Alan. We have a question from Mike Gray. What do you think are some of the key challenges for criminology as a discipline? And would you have any advice for students who are just starting their career in criminology?
It depends where. In the Anglo-Saxon world, you have thousands of criminologists, professors, education centers, university, college, whatever, research centers, publication, books, documents. You have the International Journal of Criminology that is published here, in most of the rest of the world, the question is now not about criminology as a discipline or a science, but about its development and the limit or no limits of its use. That's why I try to go on the war and criminology issue. In France, it's a little more complicated because criminology is an old emerging science. It's old because we begin to discuss criminological issue with Germany and Italy very early, but the discipline almost disappeared from college and universities and reappears with my election as a professor at the National Conservatory of Arts and Crafts in 2009, but I'm still the one and only professor of criminology. I have a lot of colleagues that do criminology, but under another banner, political science, ethnology, penal law, etc. And it's an emerging discipline in France, but everywhere else, you have a lot of options that are totally open, a lot of opportunities in the public or the private sector, and the main thing is to always think that you need to have let's say a choice that is that equalize law, human science, and a bit of criminalistics, which is what we do in my in the master I direct. But I saw a lot of very good and very interesting programs in Belgium, Switzerland, Canada, United States, of course, Great Britain, Italy, and of course you can come to Paris.
Thank you. If anybody has any questions, please put them in the Q&A window in Zoom or in the chat. I have another question here. Do you have any comments on bridging the gap between cybersecurity and cyber criminology?
First, we have an issue about what is cyber. For a lot of people who discuss cyber, they think it's data security and it's a pure technological issue that will be cured by geeks and some software. In fact, it's the only alliance between technological engineering and social engineering. So we do a lot of social engineering with engineers to give them the opportunity to understand why the patch, the software doesn't work when the human factor is a main key of an intrusion or a destruction or a theft or a ransomware or whatever happens in the cyber world, which is not only limited to what we call in France hard science, but which is, of course, a large part of psychology and criminology. So we have a very good connection on this issue, and we do cyber criminology. We opened a Cyberthreats lecture last year, and we are developing now a new master's, which is a common production between the criminology department and the computer department, because after fighting and not understanding each other for almost a decade, we now are working end-to-end just to give cybersecurity a bit of cyber criminology intelligence.
Thank you. It looks like we don't have any more questions, so we will leave it at that. And we hope to see you in the next series of panels that will start at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you, Professor Boer, and thank you to everyone joining us in this opening keynote.
See you soon.
We will see you soon.